About more than 300,000 people, which is more than 40% of population of Fiji, were impacted by the storm. And this is the moment I would like to ask, to invite our last guests, the citizens of Fiji. Litia Balaileivuka and Kelvin Anthony, please welcome.
Okay, just give us a moment because we want to welcome our guests in a special way so we can try to create a space for Litia. So if you can help us to remove this place and give us a moment.
Hello. Bulvinaka, my name is Litia, and I will share with you tonight my story. Being in the Pacific, my parents brought me up with two priorities. The first being God, and the second being family. So growing up in the Pacific, some of my most favorite childhood memories were around going to the village, my mom's village, which is called Nassau, on a small island called Koro in the province of Lomaiviti in Fiji. I'd go there, and one of the best things about being in a Pacific Island village is that every young child is your cousin, every woman is your aunt or your grandmother, and every man is your uncle or your grandfather. So my cousins and I would enjoy the ocean, swimming and just playing. I would go fishing with my aunties, who would pretty much be boss with that fishing wire. And during our Christmas feasts, my uncles would come back after hours and hours of nighttime fishing and battling the ocean. They'd come back like warriors with their catch and the harvest of the year so that we can share in that feast together. What was also amazing is that every single home in that village was my home. I could go into any house, spend a whole day with that family like it was my own. My aunt and uncle would feed me until I could be fed no more. And then they would still let me go with a plate of some warm bambakau, which is like a Fijian pancake, or some warm banilolo, which is steamed coconut buns. By the way, if it hasn't already hit you, I'm missing home right now. I miss the food. So when the warning for Cyclone Winston came in 2016, we all prepared ourselves. We had got the rations thinking that it'll only be a day or so before the shops open up again. My brother and I, we were one of the lucky ones. We lived in Suva at the time. We are still living in Suva. And all we had to worry about was the water that was coming into the windows, in through the windows. That was it. Me and my brother, or mostly my brother, mopped up the windows, mopped up the floors from which the wind and the rain came in through the windows. That's all we had to worry about. We were lucky. We got away. It wasn't until 3 days later, after having not been connected with our family from the villages in the islands, that we were told that my mom's village had been completely destroyed. Every single house gone. Not one house left standing. My cousins, who I enjoyed playing in the ocean with, they all came back to Suva with us. They ran away. They were afraid of the ocean. There were some of my cousins who were so afraid that at the sound of thunder or the sound of a truck going by, they would hide under tables. My aunts, they were afraid. Some of them refused to go back to the ocean to fish, and still refuse. It's 2018 now. My uncles, warriors of the ocean, they too were afraid. This one source of life had become a threat. What we had known and what we have built our culture and livelihoods around, we were afraid of. Now, I'm going back. I go back home in a week's time, and I'm allowed to, well, I get to spend time with my family, and I will go back to my mom's village for the first time in a very long time. I'm going back to go and see the house that we had spent so much of our childhood in, rebuilt. However, going back this Christmas, it's not going to be the same. Every single person has changed. Everything about the village has changed. But it's a good change. We've become stronger because each and every cyclone has taught us to adapt. We learn to be better prepared. Thatched roofs become corrugated iron. Walls that were once woven are now concrete. But I'm here to share my story because I don't think it's fair. It's not fair that we in the Pacific, who have very small contributions to our global emissions, are having to suffer the most, whilst each and every one of these countries continue to pollute even more and are in these negotiation rooms deciding our future. We're here preparing for the next cyclone. We're here preparing for a cyclone more intense than Cyclone Winston. We're here praying that our family and loved ones will be safe. What I want, and what so many others want from these negotiation rooms, is for our world leaders to finally make that commitment to phase out fossil fuels. It's no longer about what they can profit from this now. It's about whether or not we will live to tell another story? How much more will we have to adapt? Pinaka.
Kelvin, Anthony, please. Is it fair that you have to adapt? Is it fair that you have to make those changes to the new climate? Is it fair that you have to face the new threats even if you are not responsible for them?
The simple answer, no, it's not fair. But it's something that we've had to do and that we will continue to do because we are strong people. And it's not a matter of whether or not we want to adapt. It's that we have to. We don't have a choice. These companies can choose to stop. These countries can choose to phase out fossil fuels. We can't choose whether or not we want to rebuild our homes. We can't choose whether or not our loved ones will live. So no, it's not fair.
Check. So Winston really messed Fiji up in very blunt language. And so, it was something that, like, for me growing up, I had never experienced. It was something that so many other people who are, in my generation, who have lived in my generation, have never experienced. So when Winston happened, it just completely wiped out entire sort of communities. Almost 540,000 people, more than half of the population, directly or indirectly affected. And like schools flattened, houses destroyed, and the people do not have the answers. We don't have the resources. We do not have the capacity to sort of respond immediately after that sort of a major catastrophe. And when we were being warned about, you expect a cyclone, it's going to be fierce, severe. Even though we did not expect that, like, we did not know what to expect. So when we had no communications for 3-4 days in the urban areas, in the outer islands, people were not able to communicate. There were people who had, they lost their lives, and we could not. So we were living the reality of the impacts of climate change, and still people were not talking about climate change. In the islands, people are really strong with their faith, and they were saying, "Oh, it's because it's God," So I think that moment is when Winston happened. That's when people are more aware about what climate change can do, how it can impact the lives of ordinary people, and how it can really set us back for many decades. And it's really difficult to rebuild. We're still rebuilding. Like Fijians are, even after 1 year, after 1 year, people are still living in tents. Students were going to school in makeshift sort of shelters. And it was just so difficult to respond, because we are tiny communities in the South Pacific Ocean, splattered across the South Pacific Ocean. And we don't have the resources, we don't have the capacity to respond. We need help from, the developed nations, from the high polluting economies, who are the reason why we have this problem, which is called climate change. And so, how can it be fair?
When we talk here, it's very often, and also I think Joanna and Yep and AG also told that we talk about climate justice, but we also talk about the responsibility of our leaders. But when I was thinking about the leadership, the thing that came to my mind was, after all, at the end, the leaders are chosen by us, by the people, by all of us who are sitting here. And the leaders are just like fulfilling the will of their nations. So maybe that means that we are still not ready. I don't mean the leaders, but the nation, the society, the global society itself. Maybe we are not that ready to respond to the global threat, which is a climate crisis.
That's one way to put it, I think, personally. But the fact that we had Joanna and Yap and AG, they mentioned something which stuck with me, and that was that there's power in our stories, and that actions of the collective is what matters. And when we were at the climate march yesterday, we saw thousands of people turn out. So, that was a powerful moment, seeing that people from the European countries and from all around the world who are here, who stood in solidarity for sort of a common cause. We all have one goal, and there are people doing things, standing up for climate justice. And the moment for me was when I saw a mother with her young 6 or 7 year old kid. They're from Poland, from Katowice, and the little boy was carrying a banner and marching along with all these thousands of people. So that gives me hope. That moment gave me hope.
We have elected all these people into power. We've elected our leaders into power, but they fail to represent all the people. And that's obvious because we have these school strikes all over the world, and just people rising up. There is an outroar of people just wanting climate justice. And it's not only in the Pacific or in Asia, it's happening in Europe, it's happening in Australia. These are places where their world leaders are coming into these spaces and not really voicing what is so obvious that the people want, and that's action. There's so much talk, and there's too much talk of change, but no one is making that change. We are running out of time. There's no time for us to continue to make decisions on whether or not the IPCC is welcomed or whether it's noted. It's a fact. And one thing that our leaders can continue to try and disclaim the science, but the experience that we are encountering is real, and they cannot tell us that what we're experiencing isn't real.
Do you think we should be more radical as a society? If nobody is listening what you are talking about, maybe it's time to scream. Or maybe it's completely wrong attitude.
I think if there was a better word than radical, I'd use that. But yeah, I think we need to be more disruptive because there's strength in there's strength in numbers, and as individuals, as ordinary people, if we come together and be more disruptive, I think that's the only way that we can be listened to. Because like it frustrates me going to the venue outside every day, listening to the negotiators, battling over, whether to, like Johanna said, note the IPCC report or welcome the IPCC report. So like, what's not clear? Like, what am I missing? The IPCC report explicitly states that we need to urgently act to reduce our carbon emissions, but the negotiators are battling over words, terminology that could like really mess our climate up in the next 12 years. And we talk about sea level rise, but the fact that we encounter severe weather events year in and out. Like we no longer have a cyclone season in the Pacific. Like we can have a cyclone any time of the year, and that's ridiculous. It's not our fault. So I think we need to be more disruptive, and we are already strong together here, people from different places sharing our stories, inspiring action. Just, I think, being more disruptive.
So being more radical. I don't ask only about Fiji. I don't only ask about your nation and your islands, but about all Pacific. What are the perspectives of people of Pacific if there will be no change?
I think the one thing that the Pacific is a pretty shitty place. Excuse my language. Like a pretty bad place for politics. Yeah, but the one thing that our leaders are really united. One issue that we are united on is climate change. So our leaders already acknowledge that climate change is the most single biggest threat to the South Pacific nations, and that's something that our leaders continue to sort of push at the global level. So the feeling in the Pacific is that they've been bold at international forums, saying that like high polluting economies need to commit to reduce emissions so that we can have there's meaningful action on climate change. And so if so just lost my chain of thought. So the call has always been that we need to phase out fossil fuel. We need to put an end to fossil fuel. So I think the call from the Pacific is very clear. And just like Yap and AG before they left, they said that we all need to come together and amplify, because it's not just the Pacific that's been affected. Like the Pacific is united on this one issue, which is climate change, and we can see all these other vulnerable communities, the vulnerable countries are coming together, to have a more solid, powerful voice to call for climate action.
So just moving away from the politics for a little while. In terms of livelihood, the soil is getting saltier. People cannot plant food. This is our form of sustenance. And if we can't plant food, if we cannot sustain ourselves, what is there for us to do? There are islands, whole islands disappearing as a result of sea level rise. And because of the increased and enhanced cyclones and weather changes that we have, we can't keep rebuilding and having our houses destroyed again, all because there is no change. It's threatening the way that we live our very lives. It's not just about money and materialistic things. Our culture, there are things of our culture that are dying down because we have to adapt so much. We cannot fish the way that we did before because there's no more fish. Thank you.
The very last thing, I asked already about this to Joanna, to Jeb, to AG, and I will ask about this again. Can you be optimistic? Despite the things that you are talking about?
So, I think, again, pulling from Joanna, she mentioned that, you know, it feels like that the world doesn't care. Litia and I had gone to visit the Rybnik power station, so just to see, because we've never seen a sort of a coal-fired power station. So when it was a pretty emotional sort of journey to the power station and back, because we think that the world is listening, and our calls for climate action has been, you know, people are listening to it. But here we are in Poland, like the coal capital of, here in Katowice, and it's the coal capital of Poland, and it's business as usual, you know. So so I don't, like, you don't know what to say. Like, I feel sad because I have a 3-year-old daughter, and I'm like, I'm gonna save the world for my daughter. But you know, when you come here and you think like, this fight that we're fighting, is it even worth it? But then, you know, I took a moment to reflect, and like Joanna again said, that, you know, we always need to keep going back to our why. And so when things don't seem like they make sense and you feel like you don't have any answers, so I was like, you know, what's my why? And for me, it's my daughter, because I would want her to grow up in the islands and live, you know, with the abundance that it has to offer. And that's what gives me hope. Like, and the fact that, you know, Yep also said that, you know, I don't have a lot, I'm not too optimistic about the people who are the roadblock in the negotiating rooms, and the countries that continue to pollute and the greed is their priority. But there are people, there are leaders within those walls who are still pushing, who are still fighting, and that's what keeps me optimistic.
Yeah. Just to add on a little, being at that coal-fired power station and in Rybnik, seeing how the fumes were just being emitted into the air the way that it was, and that it wasn't being, I think what blew my mind was the fact that they don't get turned off, and there are thousands of those all around the world. So just seeing that, I felt so helpless, you know, that something this far away is impacting our home, is impacting my home. But at the same time, we've been releasing a bunch of videos on social media, and just, I guess, reading that support from the Pacific and how people are just standing with us at home, that was the reminder for me that our purpose here is beyond us. It's beyond how we feel, the helplessness that we feel. And it's a fight not just for us right now, not just for our today, but like what Kelvin was saying, it's for our children and our children's children, in the hope that they will live in a world that is cleaner, and that they will enjoy what we enjoy, or better than what we are enjoying.
Thank you very much. Litia and Kelvin, thank you very much again for coming. I don't have words to describe what I heard. Just only last one question for you. Take this message from the people from the other side of the world. Sometimes we can feel that they are completely disconnected from us. It's completely not true. They are, we believe it or not, they are our neighbors. So take their words, carry them, and act. Thank you all very much.